Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 841 for the 17th of November 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you this week from the heart of the universe in some respects. This is the headquarters. We are in the Bill Shatner Room here at Maynard's International Studio.
That's right, the Shatner Room at MI Studios, as we like to call it, mainly National Studios. As we look around, we've got the Lost in Space 30th anniversary poster there. We've got the Top 100 from August 1978 over there, a photo of me and Kylie in bed doing an interview. It's really got everything you really need. And we've got the Avengers box set.
I saw that.
And not the stupid movie thing with the people. We're talking about Diana Rigg and John Steed.
The real deal.
The real
Of course,
Avengers.
when you say you have a photograph of you and Kylie Minogue.
That's right, of course, that's right. Well, here in Australia, we just call it Kylie. Kylie. Yeah. Now, what do you got coming up on this show? It's an action-packed, fun show, sure to bring a sensible chuckle to even the most jaded skeptic.
Sure to do exactly that. Adrienne Hill is back with more interviews from Las Vegas. She interviews Tim Binga, who is the library director at the Centre for Inquiry. Now, he has access to a lot of books.
I bet you his vinyl collection is in alphabetical order. Strikes me as the kind of guy that would do that. Or maybe he's got he might have his vinyl in Dewey Decimal System.
He might.
Yeah.
Now, after that, it's a very weird, interesting, futuristic turn. We have a segment which is created entirely from artificial intelligence using a script and voices which were generated in about 3 minutes based on my report about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project.
I bet you now that the phrase deep dive, the words, we'll do a deep dive into that. I wonder what they do if they're doing a podcast about scuba. I guess they have to say something else because they always say deep dive. We're doing a deper dive.
Yes. Thank you for your deep dive. Maybe we should try that. We should write in a script about deep diving.
And also a bit of vocal fries, not noticeable in the female presenter there. Bit of that, because they're going for that NPR sound.
It's quite remarkable, and I think it's just a taste of what's to come. We can assure listeners that you and I are not artificial intelligence just yet.
No, although I do have a few artificial sweeteners in me.
Yes. After that, yes.
Get on with it, Richard.
Sorry, after that, it's the last in the series from our friend Rob Palmer from the recent CSIcon meeting, the meeting for Skeptical Inquiry in Las Vegas. He talks to Brian Kerby from 502 Conversations. He's an interviewer. I've been on his show some years back. And also Malorie Mackey, who is a TV producer. And thank you, Rob, for your series of interviews.
TV producer? What, does she work for Sony? She makes all those flat screens and things. That's amazing. She must be very busy.
I think you've got it right there, Maynard. And to round off the show in the Trove segment, we look at a report written way back, in the 90s, by Sue Blackmore. Now, Sue Blackmore, many listeners will know of Sue Blackmore. She's dabbled into parapsychology and psychology of the mind and consciousness and all sorts of things like that. And I think you'll find that a very interesting report.
Oh, could you call her, is she a seeker? Does she look for the stoic?
We're all looking, Maynard. I mean, honestly.
Well, some more than others, but yeah.
So that's what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. But we've had an interesting couple of days. We have been finishing off the filming, at least, of your upcoming Christmas special.
That's right. It's got 29 separate segments, 2 that are good, and we've got all of them put together now. I've just got to edit it all together, and that goes out. You can watch it live with everybody else for free on the 7th of December, a day that will live in Thingamy. 8:15 Australian time, if that's UTC, 9:15 in the morning in the UK, but 9:15 UTC is the time it goes out on the 7th of December. So that's a really mysterious time for Americans, I think.
Americans are living in mysterious times now for sure. Yeah. But if you want to find out more, folks, just head for maynard.com.au.
But right now, I haven't got downstairs here. You look, as I've told you a few times, you can get under the house if you want to. But where are you going to run to, Richard?
We'll have to run out of the William Shatner studio here, around the corner to your fridge. And you know what? I'm going to go upstairs in your fridge, so to speak, to the freezer and get out a snake. Now, these are the candy or the lolly snakes, but when they're frozen, they're great. Well, and anyway.
And you can't eat them as fast. You see, that's why I leave them there, because you'll do your teeth in.
Well, while I do that, we hope you will enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello, everybody. This is Adrienne Hill, and I am reporting right now from Las Vegas at CSIcon, and I'm here with
Timothy Binga. You can call me Tim. I thought we were being formal. But anyway, my name is Tim Binga. I'm the library director at the Center for Inquiry, and this weekend I happen to be running the bookstore at CSIcon.
Yeah, and you get to see a whole lot of interesting speakers. And are you in charge of getting their books signed?
Yes, I'm in charge of everything related to the bookstore. So once Barry Carr selects what authors or speakers we're going to have, I go and try to find the books. We have books, of course, by Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Cox, who are here, but also Michael Mann and some of our own people like Stephen Hupp. And Ben Radford stopped by, even though he wasn't really part of the conference, but that was nice seeing him. Folks like that. So it's really, really been fun seeing people here.
I was so impressed with the library you are in charge of at the Amherst CFI. I guess you call it the head office?
Yeah, or the mothership. So, yes, we're in Amherst. We have about 30 people who work for the company directly right now, and about maybe, I think, 15 of us are in the office at any given time. We have less people now. As of COVID, we have more people working from home. I'm in charge of the library. Well, I'm in charge of the Ingersoll Museum as well, and the Free Thought Trail. Something different. But the library is an 84,000 volume library. We have about 120,000 issues of periodicals. We have microfilm and microfiche and everything that's 100% library. I'm a member of OCLC, so I'm able to do book loans, and we consider ourselves a library of last resort. Like if you need to borrow materials but you can't get them from your local library, we can usually supply them, but we like to not be the first supplier. We'd like you to have us at the end of the list rather than the beginning of the list for that. Can
you explain you did a bunch of letters there. You're a member of...
OCLC is an online library consortium where you can get library records for bibliographic purposes, but also you can do interlibrary loan. They're able to send research over directly, so PDFs or electronic documents and things like that can be done that way.
And if I remember from the tour, you actually have people come and stay and do research in your library because you have such an interesting collection.
Yes, we have long-term scholars who come. We have some who come for a day, some who come for weeks at a time.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the rare books that you have in a very special room downstairs? I believe it's climate controlled.
Yes, in the rare book room we have many. Most of the things go with free thought rather than the skeptical side, because I take care of both of those items. But we do have some really interesting things like Ethan Allen of Green Mountain Boys fame. He wrote the first deist work in the United States called Reason, the Only Oracle of Man. And so we have a first edition of that. We have the Pain stuff. We do have The Age of Reason. We have first editions of all those. A lot of really good things there. We have a lot of Ingersoll. The museum, we run that. I'm in charge of the museum as well. But we also have a lot of his books, and we actually have the items from his granddaughter. When she passed away, we received a lot of items from her estate. So we have signed works from her as well. And they didn't belong to Robert, but they were in from his family. So and we have a couple scrapbooks that came from them as well. More on the skeptical side, we don't have a considerable amount of items because they're a lot more expensive than the free thought stuff. And I'm saying that from a book purchasing point of view. The skeptical stuff has a tendency to be like psychic stuff or paranormal stuff or things like that. And there are people who collect those items. So therefore the price is much higher for those than the free thought stuff, which hardly anybody collects anymore. We are one of the few, which is what makes my job so important, is for keeping those items and preserving, because my primary mission is to preserve and acquire those items and things like like that. So
going back a little bit to Skeptical Archives, I believe you have in your basement a lot of stuff from Quackwatch.
Quackwatch came over to us a few years ago. We have all the files that were created by Dr. Barrett, and basically he moved them out of his house. He still runs this website and does all the work for it, but now we have all the materials at CFI. A couple collections I want to talk to you about, which I just remembered, of course. One of them is we actually have the Martin Gardner collection, which in 2002 I went to his, no, it's 2001. I went to his home it was at the time North Carolina. He was moving to be near his family. I believe it was in Kansas, and so he gave us and donated books related to what we do. So skeptical collection, and it was his personal books for those things. Plus, we have some files of his as well that were related to the paranormal. We don't have his, like his magic. We don't have, especially mathematics, because that'd probably fill up a room. Mm-hmm. But those two things we don't have, but we do have anything related to paranormal or those type of things. So it's a really fun collection for that. So, and actually it's nice to go into the collection and look at some of the things that he was investigating and how he came about it. And he has correspondences with, famous people and pro-paranormal folks, skeptics when he was writing books. It was really nice.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's great. It's actually time to go and listen to another speaker, and I'm sure there's going to be more people coming in to buy books.
Great. Thanks.
Hey everyone, it's Brian Dunning from Skeptoid here. I want to extend a special invitation to all of you. In mid-2025, Skeptoid will be celebrating our 1000th podcast episode. So we're throwing a big party by taking 60 of you to the Bermuda Triangle. It's July 7th through the 11th, departing and returning at Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're having our own Skeptic Conference in our private conference facility aboard ship, plus more Skeptoidy events ashore at stops on Bimini and Key West. Come and celebrate 1,000 episodes of Skeptoid with me and a boatload of special guests in the Bermuda Triangle. You can learn all about it and punch your ticket now at skeptoid.com/events. That's skeptoid.com/events. Reserve your spot now and hope you make it back.
Do we live in a brave new world? We live in a different world, rapidly becoming more and more so by the hour. This week, my friend, and you hear her sometimes on the Skeptic Zone, especially during the dice game, Lara Benham, the Secretary of Australian Skeptics, brought to my attention something called Notebook LM. Notebook LM. And this is relatively new AI, which will summarize things for you if you feed it documents, PDFs, web pages, a YouTube video. It will analyze it, the text, and summarize it. But much more. It will also create a two-person chat about the topics or the document you feed it. And I must admit I'm quite astonished. So what I did was I uploaded to this new AI the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Report, the report I wrote a few years back, which was published in the Skeptic magazine here in Australia. Now, I read out this full report with the help of Adrienne Hill some years ago on the Skeptic Zone. In fact, if you go to the Skeptic Zone webpage, right at the top there's a link to that episode, so you can hear it or read it for yourself. But I was curious to see what this AI would make out of the report. I uploaded it within 3 minutes. This is what AI produced. And I'll come back at the end with a few comments.
Hey there. Welcome back to the deep dive. you sent us a massive study on psychic predictions, and I'm super curious to see what it uncovered.
Yeah.
It's called the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project.
Okay.
And it's a deep dive into whether people can actually see the future.
Yes. This study is fascinating.
Dope.
It's a huge GE investigation.
Okay.
Spanning over 2 decades, think over 3,800 predictions.
Oh, wow.
Made over 21 years by over 200 self-proclaimed psychics from all across Australia, and we're not talking vague pronouncements here. These predictions cover a wide array of topics like politics, celebrities, natural disasters, and even sporting events like the Melbourne Cup.
Wow. They really were going for it. So did they actually find any proof that these psychics were onto something?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But before we get to the conclusions, let's rewind a bit.
Okay, let's unpack how this whole project got started.
It all began back in 2010 when someone decided to take a closer look at predictions from the Australian Psychics Directory and see how they held up over time. What's interesting is that the media rarely does any follow-ups to see if predictions actually come true.
Right.
There isn't a lot of accountability there.
That's so true. It's like they make these pronouncements and then everyone just moves on.
Exactly. But the researchers behind this project were determined to approach it differently. They wanted to be completely impartial. They followed a principle called Hyman's maxim, which essentially means don't try to explain how something works until you find out that it works.
So they weren't setting out to debunk psychics right from the get-go.
Not at all.
Okay.
They were open to the possibility of psychic abilities, but they wanted to see some solid proof first.
I like that. So to get that proof, they had to cast a wide net, right? Looking at all sorts of predictions from various sources.
Absolutely. They examined predictions from a diverse range of sources. We're talking historical figures like Nostradamus, all the way to modern-day psychics posting videos on YouTube.
Speaking of Nostradamus, weren't his predictions supposedly used to explain all sorts of historical events, including the French Revolution and even 9/11?
You hit the nail on the head. There's a famous Nostradamus quatrain that supposedly predicted the 9/11 attacks, but it turns out it was completely fabricated by a student in Canada.
Oh, wow.
He wanted to show how easily vague predictions can be manipulated to fit any event.
It's amazing how those old prophecies get reinterpreted to fit current events.
Right.
And it's not just Nostradamus, right? What about those doomsday predictions that pop up every few years?
Oh, absolutely. Remember the 2011 rapture prediction by Harold Camping?
Yeah.
Failed prophecies are all too common, but that's what makes this project so intriguing. They wanted to move beyond anecdotal evidence and really analyze a massive amount of data.
So how do they go about collecting all these predictions? Do they have a team scouring every corner of the internet?
Pretty much for over 12 years, they meticulously gathered predictions from magazines, newspapers,
Wow.
TV shows, websites, you name it. They even looked at YouTube videos, and they didn't just collect them haphazardly. They organized everything into a comprehensive database.
Wow, that's some serious dedication. But I imagine trying to analyze over 3,800 predictions must have been a huge task. How do you even begin to determine what counts as a correct prediction?
Yeah.
Especially when dealing with vague pronouncements.
That's where it gets tricky. Even seemingly straightforward predictions can be difficult to assess. Let's say a psychic predicts the winner of a 2-team sporting match.
Okay.
Technically, there's a 50-50 chance of getting it right, even without any psychic abilities.
Right, so how do you factor that in?
Yeah.
And what about those vague predictions? I bet those were a real headache.
You said it. There's actually a principle called Brandolini's Law, which states that the amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude larger than is needed to produce it. In other words, debunking vague predictions can be a very time-consuming process.
Can you give us an example of a prediction that would be considered too vague to really assess?
Sure. Think of a prediction like a major Hollywood couple with connections to Europe will go their separate ways.
Okay.
That's so broad. Who are we talking about? What constitutes major? What even qualifies as a connection to Europe?
Right. You could probably fit any celebrity breakup into that category. It seems impossible to prove or disprove.
Exactly. And that's where we often see shoehorning psychics might make a vague prediction, and then after an event happens, they try to reinterpret their prediction to fit the event, even if it wasn't what they originally meant.
Oh, I've seen that they'll claim to have predicted some major event, even though their original prediction was about something completely different.
Exactly. And that's why this project was so meticulous. They analyzed the predictions before the events happened to see if there was any real predictive power there.
Okay, so they've got this massive database, a system for analyzing the predictions. What did they find? What's the verdict on psychic powers?
Well, after analyzing thousands of predictions over a significant period of time, the study's conclusions are pretty clear-cut.
Well, the results are pretty surprising. The success rate for all these predictions hovered around 11%, statistically no better than chance or random guessing.
Wow, that's pretty underwhelming considering we're talking thousands of predictions made over more than 2 decades.
Exactly. And remember, these weren't just vague predictions about good vibes coming your way. These were specific predictions about events and outcomes.
So if psychics aren't hitting the mark on these specific predictions, what about their track record with major world events, the things that really shake things up?
That's where it gets even more interesting. What's fascinating is that they missed some really significant events. We're talking 9/11, the rise of Donald Trump, the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, the COVID-19 pandemic. Huge world-altering events that seemingly flew under the radar of the psychic world. It's mind-boggling. You'd think if you could genuinely see the future, you'd at least pick up on some of the big ones, right?
You would think, especially events that, in retrospect, had some warning signs. Experts had been discussing the possibility of a pandemic for years before COVID-19 hit.
Okay, but predicting a pandemic in general is one thing. Predicting a specific virus down to the month it emerges, that seems like a much taller order.
Of course, but that's the point. If psychics were tapping into some precognitive ability, you'd expect to see a pattern of accurate predictions, even if they weren't always perfectly precise.
So what we're seeing is a few lucky guesses and a whole lot of misses.
Pretty much. And it's not just about world events. These psychics were also making predictions about things like horse races and celebrity gossip. You'd think if they could accurately predict who is going to win the Melbourne Cup, they'd be cleaning up at the racetrack.
That's true. So what does this all mean for the idea of psychic abilities? Are we to believe that they just don't exist?
Well, this study certainly doesn't provide any compelling evidence to support the notion of reliable psychic predictions.
But isn't it possible that maybe we just haven't found the right psychic yet? The one person who truly has the gift.
It's impossible to rule that out completely. However, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and this study, which was quite comprehensive, simply didn't find it.
So no magic crystal ball, no secret hotline to the cosmos.
Based on this research, it seems not.
All right, so if relying on psychic predictions to know what the future holds is a bust, how did regular people fare when it came to making predictions?
Well, the researchers included a control group of non-psychics in their study. These individuals made predictions for the year 2017 just to see how their accuracy compared to the self-proclaimed psychics.
That's a great point of comparison. So how did the average Joe stack up against the supposed psychics?
You might be surprised to learn that the control group actually had a slightly higher success rate than the psychics.
Hold on. So you're telling me that a bunch of regular people with no claimed psychic abilities were better at predicting the future than the so-called experts?
In this particular instance, yes. But it's important to note that the control group was much smaller than the group of psychics studied.
That's still pretty wild.
Yeah.
Maybe we all have a little bit of psychic potential lurking within us. Or maybe it just proves that sometimes random chance is more powerful than we think.
Perhaps it's a bit of both. We all have intuitions and hunches, whether those are glimpses into the future or just our brains making connections based on past experiences. That's a question for another day.
So after this deep dive into the world of psychic predictions, where do we stand?
While the future remains a mystery, what we can glean from this study is that putting too much stock in psychic predictions might not be the best approach.
I guess the takeaway here is to embrace the uncertainty.
Right, absolutely. The unpredictability of life is what keeps things interesting.
Well said. But before we wrap things up, let's talk about the things the psychics completely missed in their predictions. We touched on some of the big ones earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about these glaring omissions.
Of course. And the list is quite extensive. It's not just about missing one or two big events. It's a pattern of overlooking occurrences that significantly shaped the world.
We touched on some of the major misses. 9/11, the rise of Donald Trump, the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, and the COVID-19 pandemic. But were there any other noteworthy events that these psychics failed to foresee?
Absolutely. The study highlights numerous other significant events that went unpredicted. Major political upheavals, natural disasters, even celebrity deaths that captured global attention were absent from their predictions.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Not all psychics focus on predicting global events, right? Some might specialize in more personal readings like relationship advice or career prediction.
That's true. However, even those more personalized predictions were largely hit or miss, according to the study. What's more interesting is that a good portion of the successful predictions were about events that you could reasonably expect to happen anyway.
So kind of like predicting the sun will rise in the east. technically correct, but not exactly proof of some mystical ability.
Exactly. For example, predicting an earthquake in a region known for seismic activity isn't exactly a groundbreaking revelation. It just means they understand basic geology and probability.
So if we connect this back to the study's conclusions, it really underscores the point that a lot of these predictions, especially the ones that come true, aren't necessarily evidence of psychic powers. It's more about playing the odds.
Precisely. And when you consider the vast number of predictions that were completely wrong or too vague to even assess, it really casts doubt on the notion of reliable psychic predictions.
So after all this research, thousands of predictions, analyzed years of data compiled, what's the final takeaway? Should we just toss out the idea of psychic abilities altogether?
Well, this study certainly raises serious questions about the reliability of psychic predictions. The findings suggest that the success rate is simply too low to indicate anything beyond chance or coincidence.
But there's always that lingering question, isn't there? What if we just haven't found the right psychic yet? The one person who truly can see the future?
Of course, it's impossible to definitively prove that such an individual doesn't exist. However, based on this extensive research, which involved a significant number of self-proclaimed psychics, the evidence just isn't there to support that claim.
So what does all of this mean for us, the listeners? Are we destined to wander through life blindly unsure of what the future holds?
Not at all. In fact, I think this research is actually quite empowering. It reminds us that the future isn't predetermined. We have the power to shape our own destinies. Our choices influence the course of our lives.
I love that perspective. It means we're not just passive passengers on this journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a more comforting thought than relying on some external force to tell us what's going to happen. We have agency, we have free will, and that's something to celebrate.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So while the allure of knowing the future is undeniable, it seems like the real magic lies in embracing the unknown and creating our own paths.
Well said.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into the world of psychic predictions. It was a fascinating and thought-provoking journey. To our listeners, what are your thoughts? Are you swayed by the evidence, or are you still holding out hope for a little bit of magic in the world? Let us know in the comments.
Well, I don't know about you, but I was quite astonished. It's mostly right. It gets a few little bits and pieces wrong in there, possibly because there could have been a typo in the version of the report I uploaded. And the part near the end about optimism and free will simply doesn't appear in the report, and it's not the conclusion of the report at all. It's a different set of conclusions. So I don't know where that came from, but nevertheless, what does this mean for the future of podcasting? I wonder. Rest assured, my voice right now is real. And I'm sitting here without a script in front of me, just ad-libbing my thoughts. Now, I don't intend to make a habit of using this technology on the Skeptic Zone. I think that would be cheating. It would be shortchanging you, the listener, who expect real reports by real people. But I thought it was worth playing that because it's the world we live in now. I wonder what you think about that.
Of misinformation or disinformation. What does it mean to do your own research? In the world of medicine, we talk a lot about big pharma, but who's talking about big chakra? And who am I? I'm Alanta Colley. I am a science communicator, comedian, and I am your MC for Skepticon XL. Does that mean extra large Skepticon or Skepticon the 40th, I hear you ask? Porque no los dos. Sometimes a thing means two things. It will be an extra large Skepticon this year as Skepticon turns 40th, happening in Sydney on the 23rd and 24th of November. The speakers lineup look amazing. We've got Dr. Carl, we've got Robin Williams. I'll be there sharing some of my insights into the evidence base behind various alternative medicines. So why don't you pop along? Head to skepticon.org.au to grab your tickets, and we can all meet up and let's get skeptical together.
I am here with someone who has I don't even know if I should say a podcast, a YouTube channel, or a national broadcast service. I'll let him explain it. Please introduce yourself and tell me, what is your role in skepticism?
Well, my name is Brian Kerby. I host 502 Conversations. I'm a production manager at an education channel in the Boston area. So it's mostly for broadcast. It does go on YouTube. I have a small YouTube audience, which is fine with me right now. But the show, as you, I guess, implied, it gets syndicated to many other shows, and then, it gets syndicated to many other stations and picked up around the United States.
And 502 Conversations, and where did the 502 come from?
It's the address of the building. Man.
Yes, and you're volunteering
Yes, right.
So how did that happen? How did you decide to be a volunteer here?
At the bottom of the CSIcon registration page, would you like to volunteer, is another button. And so I clicked that a couple of years ago.
Do they give you any perk for doing that, or is it just out of the goodness of your heart?
Mostly it's out of the goodness of my heart, which there's not a lot in there. So fortunately, when I go home, other people, it's a detriment to others in the world.
Oh, so it's a zero-sum game. You've used it all up here, so.
But the perk is there is a dinner for all the volunteers.
Oh, that's very nice. I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's one meal I don't have to pay for in Vegas.
And it's freaking expensive here, I will say.
It is not inexpensive.
I will say that. Even the food court. Nathan's hot dog and french fries, 12-something plus tax and tip. What have you found interesting, different, or whatever about this particular year? Because I know you've been to CSIcon quite often.
To start was fantastic. Going from Massimo Pigliucci to Melanie Tresick-King to Stephen Novella, that was the best start I've ever seen. It was just for something, the way those three flowed together was fantastic. I thought Stephen Novella's talk was great. He had, 3 or 4 different things when skeptics disagree?
Yes.
And he ended with a bang?
Yes, and I think it was really intended to talk about that, and he wanted to lead in a little bit gently, yes.
I thought it was a great explanation of his view on it.
Yes.
And it made that actually, I should say, something unexpected. Then that was unexpected for me, and it did make me think quite a bit about it and modify some of my outlook.
Well, that's fantastic. Because
I should say that I've had people on my podcast or my show. So it's a video really, but then I also separate the audio and make a podcast out of it. I'm big into the video because I think if you watch my show, if you listen to a podcast and then you go back and watch the same show, you can see a lot going on in people's faces when they're listening to me ask a question or when they're responding to it.
By the way, so we're kind of beating around the bush there, but the subject that Steve was talking about was the question about whether sex is binary or not. And
it's a lot. Okay, that's a simple way to phrase it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and this was contrary to a speaker today, Jerry Coyne,
who has published in Skeptic
Inquirer. So this is interesting. Steve brought to the forefront, for discussion, this topic, and I think that was nice of him to do.
And then he followed up by saying today that, Jerry Coyne was rebutting some points he did not make, which I'm glad he said that because I heard both of them. They both made some good points, I think, especially one if you have to go binary for like a reason to research or something and then make some exceptions. Okay, that's a scientific thing. I'm not saying Steve is denying that at all, but this has happened.
He put it they were talking past each other.
Right.
Steve did, which
so
is
I
interesting.
think that's right. I mean, I've read other. Recently I read a paper on a cardiology view on something, but then months later I read there was an opinion coming out why this person was all wrong. So I thought, this will be interesting. So I read the paper on why they were all wrong, but why they were all wrong, the person was arguing against nothing that the original paper said. They were just making their own points. So it was kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, apparently that's not such an uncommon thing for people to do in a discussion or a debate.
But if you're going to say why someone is all wrong, then you say they're wrong because they said this, and that is not correct.
Right. So I just walked out of a live recording of the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, the next episode coming up, and Steve began it discussing about this topic, and he invited Jerry Coyne on for a debate. So
or a discussion.
A discussion. I hope that happens. All right.
That would be interesting.
All right. Well, thank you for giving me your time, Brian, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
I will. Thank you so much, Rob. I will see you at the Sunday papers.
Banachek's show for the attendees of CSIcon 2024 just ended, and I am speaking here with someone who was chosen as a subject to go up on the stage. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Malorie Mackey.
And what was it that Banachek had you do?
He had me bend spoons.
And I saw the spoon bend and break right in your hand. How did that happen?
I really don't know. He said I would feel something, and I did, and then it just fell in half. And then I was touching it, and it bent. Can't explain it.
I don't understand. When I see things like that, I always think the people are a paid shill. But I actually interviewed Banachek for my column, and he swears he never works with people like that. So he never approached you, right, for the record?
No, never. I've never seen him before.
Quite amazing. Okay, so what's your interest in skepticism? Why are you at this conference?
So I study anthropology with a specialization in mythology, folklore, occult studies. So I love the unusual. And I love that the Skeptical Inquirer kind of reviews a lot of, the secrets behind the unusual.
And I heard a rumor that you actually have an article coming out in the magazine?
I do. I have an article coming out discussing my time on Robben Island. So that's the island in South Africa where they held Nelson Mandela. It was a leper colony, it was an Irish colony, it was a World War II base, then it became a political prison.
Wow.
And now it's kind of just a vacant island with a museum on it and a lot of penguin scientists.
I was not aware that was the name. And this is the place where Nelson Mandela died, right, in prison?
I don't think he died in prison.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the Mandela effect, that if you remember him getting out and becoming president, then you're wrong, and he actually died in prison.
Then yes, I had the Mandela effect. Oh, God. My mind is blown from the show. It's all mush.
So speaking of shows, I also heard a rumor that you have a TV show. What's that about?
Yes, so Weird World Adventures showcases this world in a different way. We highlight the unique, the bizarre, the strange, wonderfully weird people living weird lives, and I'm a self-identified weirdo, so it's done in a very loving way. And
where can people find this?
It's on Amazon Prime. So at Weird World Adventures, you can also search for Malorie's Adventures, and I have a blog that comes up with it as well.
Okay, and you also do a podcast, is that true?
I do. Weird World Adventures has an accompanying podcast. And we like to approach the ideas of different belief systems anthropologically, understanding different cultures, and addressing topics that are paranormal in a way that is respectful but also skeptical.
Okay, so let me ask you one more question. Besides your feeling this strange force that made a spoon break right in your hand, what was your other highlight of the conference?
Watching The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and hearing Neil deGrasse Tyson speak.
Were you a fan of the SGU?
Yes, definitely. My partner who's here with me, Michael Maldonado, he's been a big fan forever. He brought me into this world, and so we were very much looking forward to getting to see the taping of The Skeptic's Guide. And we got the okay to get some photography and kind of cover the event some too. So we took some great pictures of it. Which
for your show?
Yes.
Very nice.
Very excited about.
Nice. Did you get the science of fiction right?
Yes.
I did too.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay. Well, pleasure meeting you. And
you
enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
That concludes my reports from CSIcon 2024. I hope you enjoyed listening to these interviews as much as I did doing them for you. Unfortunately, there will not be a CSIcon 2025, but hopefully I'll be able to interview people attending CSIcon 2026 in Buffalo, New York. This is Rob Palmer signing off from sunny Las Vegas, Nevada.
Chris, what do you call two orthopedists reading an electrocardiogram?
I don't know, Jonathan.
A double-blind study. This is the type of highbrow medical humor you can expect from The Body of Evidence, the best podcast you're not listening to.
But we don't hold it against you.
We answer the burning medical questions of the day
by seeing what the data actually says.
Because wild, unjustified pseudoscience is for the other guys.
Is it safe to take Tylenol when you're pregnant? Should we worry about microplastics harming us? Are there any dietary supplements that will help you perform better? Are the doggos all very good boys?
They are indeed very good boys.
The science on this is clear and unambiguous.
If you're getting your health advice from the Joe Rogan Experience, it may be time to come back to Earth and listen to The Body of Evidence.
Reality can be nice too. Come join us on this planet.
We also talk to experts, and there's a teddy bear.
There is. We also talk about dogs a lot.
They're better than humans.
The Body of Evidence.
Wherever you get your podcasts and at bodyofevidence.ca.
Now it's time once again to go back to those archives at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, full of digital information, ready for skeptics to peruse and enjoy. And rest assured, this is not AI speaking. This is a read from the articles coming up. Although, as mentioned earlier on in the show, with this new technology, you can simply upload or tell it the URLs for the various Trove articles, and it will also create a two-person chat about the articles. I don't intend to do that. I think we'll stick with what you expect to hear. And this week, I was looking around various references to coincidences, and I came across a name of a lady I know, Susan Blackmore. Now, I've met Susan Blackmore 2 or 3 times over the years. I seem to remember chatting to her at one of the amazing meetings 10 years ago or so, just briefly, and according to Wiki, Susan Blackmore is a British writer, lecturer, skeptic, broadcaster, and visiting professor at the University of Plymouth. Her fields of research include memetics, parapsychology, consciousness, and she is best known for her book, The Meme Machine. She has written or contributed to over 40 books and 60 scholarly articles and is a contributor to The Guardian newspaper. But let's hear from Susan herself, as posted on her wiki page, her voice recorded in 2016.
I'm Sue Blackmore. I was born in London in 1951. I did my first degree in physiology and psychology at Oxford, followed by a master's degree in environmental psychology, and then my PhD in parapsychology, because I'd had a dramatic out-of-the-body experience that made me completely convinced by all sorts of paranormal phenomena. It took years of research to come to the conclusion that there are no paranormal phenomena and to become very skeptical. I have investigated things personally through a lot of meditation and academically through the science of consciousness. I've written a lot about memes and cultural evolution, and consciousness is really the ground of it all. And so I keep asking questions about consciousness and self. Who are we? What does it mean to be conscious?
What does it mean indeed? With that in mind, let's go back to December 31 in the year 1990, as published here in the Canberra Times, which was originally from the Guardian newspaper. Coincidences are everyday occurrences. Susan Blackmore puts her mind to psychology experiments which suggest that psychic phenomena is really people's inability to calculate probability. More than half the British population believes in psychic phenomena, and most actually claim to have experienced telepathy, precognition, seeing into the future, or psychokinesis, mind over matter. But experiments in parapsychology over 50 years have failed to convince most scientists that paranormal powers really exist. But now a growing body of new psychology research suggests that the experiences may not be due to astral vibrations or the power of spirits, but to the way our minds look for non-existent connections. It is rather like a visual illusion, but psychic experience could be illusions too, but of probability rather than vision. For example, you wake up one morning from a dream in which your friend Ferdinand lies dead on the grass by a foreign motorway, covered in a white sheet. The very next day you hear that Ferdinand died that night. Anyone who has had this experience is likely to say, it couldn't possibly be a coincidence. It must be psychic. But that's where the mistake occurs. It could be a coincidence, and probably was. I'll break in here briefly to say Brian Dunning discusses this sort of thing in his early documentary, Here Be Dragons. Reading on, statistician Christopher Scott has calculated that assuming only one death dream per person per lifetime, and allowing for the number of people in Britain and the number who die each day, a coincidence like this ought to happen to someone, somewhere in Britain, once every 2 weeks. And of course, if you are one of them, you would be superhuman not to be affected by it. It's just like the visual illusion. You cannot consciously banish the illusion that something extremely strange has happened. It would seem even more stunning if Ferdinand died in a car crash or was in hospital covered in a white sheet. In a typical dream, there may be hundreds of identifiable separate details which could be right, yet we forget most of them and only remember the ones which are confirmed, so exaggerating the coincidence. And of course, this is known to skeptics as confirmation bias. Even meeting friends in odd places is susceptible to a simple analysis. One researcher calculated that his social network included 212 people whom he would greet if he met them. On a typical trip away from home, he counted seeing 460 people. On this basis, he ought to expect to meet a friend in an unusual place rather often. The basic fact is humans are not good at understanding probability. If you think you are an exception, try the questions below. Do not be dismayed if you get some wrong. And I think those questions come up a little bit later in the item. Psychologists have found that people tend to make probability estimates based on rather rough heuristics rather than anything like a mathematical calculation. For example, they might see how many instances of something they can bring to mind and base their guess on that. Not very accurate, but it may be the best we can do. Part of the problem may be that we have evolved ways of thinking appropriate to a much simpler life than the world of television pictures and instant communication we have today. Bear in mind, this was written some 34 years ago, before the internet tidal wave. If this theory of psychic experiences is correct, it should be testable. One prediction is that people who believe in the paranormal should be the worst at probability judgments. This was confirmed in a series of experiments at Bristol University with students and school children. The goats, as parapsychologists call the disbelievers, did better than the sheep, or believers. In particular, the sheep did worse at tasks requiring them to understand randomness. Perhaps this is why perfectly random coincidences in their everyday life appear to be strange, leading them to look for paranormal explanations. The major kind of psychic experience is PK, or psychokinesis, the claimed effect of mind over matter. It now seems that this too might be an illusion. As babies and throughout our lives, we learn how to control our environment by observing the coincidences between our own actions and the effects that follow. Here again, because we don't understand probability, we can easily think we have controlled something random. This is known as the illusion of control. And I'll break in here again and say, having recently been in Las Vegas and spending a little bit of time just looking at various people playing cards and roulette and something like this, you can see this in action. The essentially random action on the roulette table, but people will stand in a certain way, bet a certain way, etc. If this is the right interpretation, then again we would expect sheep to be more prone to an illusion of control than goats. And this is exactly what is found. In experiments at Bristol University, subjects tried to control a flipping coin on a computer screen. Not only did the sheep think they had more control, but they dramatically underestimated the chance rate of success. This would mean, even in a chance world, they would still be looking for explanations and concluding, quote, "It must be psychic," end quote. This may not be the whole story, and the paranormal may yet exist, but we do not need to invoke it to account for the experiences. They certainly happen and affect people deeply, but it may be all an illusion. Do you understand chance? And now we get to the questions mentioned earlier on in the item. So let's go. I'll read out these questions and then at the end we'll get to the answers. 1. A couple have 5 girls in a row. What is their next baby likely to be? A boy, B, a girl, C, either, equally likely. 2. What is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 times 8? Guess rather than work it out mathematically. 3. You are betting on heads on the toss of a coin. After a run of 10 heads, are your chances of winning on the next throw A, increased, B, decreased, C, the same? 4. A packet contains 10 mint and 10 chocolate-flavoured toffees. You pull out 10 and 8 of them are chocolate. Which are you most likely to get next time? A, chocolate, B, mint, C, either. 5. Multiply 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 6. You are betting to get heads on the toss of a coin. After a run of 5 tails, is the chance of winning next time A, increased, B, decreased, C, the same? 7. A packet contains pink and yellow sweets in unknown proportion. Or, as we say in Australia, lollies, or in North America, candy. You pull out 10 and 8 of them are yellow. Which colour are you more likely to get next? A, pink, B, yellow, C, either. 8. How many people do you need to have at a party to have a 50-50 chance that 2 have the same birthday? 9. Using only the numbers 1 to 5, make a list of 100 numbers in random order. I think number 9 might take a bit more time. Nevertheless, you can pause and do that if you want, or let's get to the answers. Answers. 1. B or C. And that was to do with the couple having 5 girls in a row. So according to Susan Blackmore here, the answers is B or C, which is what is their next baby likely to be, a girl or either. So there you go. 2. And that was, what is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 times 8? The answer is 40,320. Next one is 3. You are betting on heads on the toss of a coin. After a run of 10 heads, are your chances of winning on the next throw A, increased, B, decreased, or C, the same? And Sue says here, for that one, C, which is the same. 4. A packet contains 10 mint and 10 chocolate-flavoured toffees. You pull out 10 and 8 of them are chocolate. Which are you most likely to get next time? And Sue is indicating here the answer is B, more likely to get mint. 5. Multiply 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And the answer is, as the answer was before, 40,320. Now let's see, question number 6 was, you are betting to get heads on a toss of a coin after a run of 5 tails. Is the chance of winning next time A increased, B decreased, C the same? And Sue is indicating here it's C, the same. Question 7. A packet contains pink and yellow sweets, lollies, candy in unknown proportion. You pull out 10 and 8 of them are yellow. Which colour are you more likely to get next? And Sue is indicating here it is yellow. Question 8. How many people do you need to have at a party to have a 50-50 chance that 2 have the same birthday? The answer is 22. Only 22. Now, it says, if you got questions 1, 3, or 6 wrong, you are falling for the gambler's fallacy. Questions 2 and 5 are the same, but people usually underestimate even more for question 2. For question 8, people usually give much higher answers, but think how many possible pairs of people there will be. Question 9. A truly random string should contain about 20 repeats of the same number. And that question was using only the numbers 1 to 5. Make a list of 100 numbers in random order. How many did you have? 3 in a row counts as 2 repeats. Well, what an interesting article from Sue Blackmore all those years ago. And in my research around Trove, there are more reports of or by Sue. And I'm looking at one now from 1995, No Fat Chance in Coincidence. And Sue is mentioned here. Belief in the paranormal may be a result of our inability to assess how likely coincidences really are, according to psychologist Susan Blackmore. And another one, which is a lengthy article from 1990, in fact from November 1990 in the Canberra Times, Out-of-Body Experiences, Just a Different Reality, which mentions many things, including Sue Blackmore. It says here in one of the paragraphs, Dr Susan Blackmore, a scientist working in the Brain and Perception Laboratory of the University of Bristol in Britain, believes near-death experiences can be explained rationally in terms of changing patterns of nerve functions in the brain as it slowly shuts down. That looks like a very interesting article indeed, but you can find those for yourself. My friends, if you go to trove.nla.gov.au and you type in the name Susan Blackmore, you will soon discover the reports I've mentioned, and indeed the one I've read. And once again we discover that great truism, that great truth of the internet, that when you go to Trove, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Maynard, a very exciting week coming up. Ben Radford will be in the country. He's doing a bit of touring. He's looking for monsters here and there, from Darwin to Alice Springs to Perth to who knows where, in preparation for his appearance at the Australian Skeptics National Convention. You can still get tickets at skepticon.org.au.
And I'll be one of the conveyors, the enabler of that conversation between you and Ben on the Sunday afternoon.
That's right. There's a special panel called, I think it's called Squaring the Zone. So it's the first joint venture, I guess, between the Skeptic Zone and Squaring the Strange podcast, live on stage, and you'll be directing the action.
And I've got I've got to pick him up on a point. Squaring the Strange, they once had an episode all about mermaids and mermen. And at no time during the entire show did they even play one track off the Ethel Merman disco album.
That is disappointing.
I know.
Dropped
the ball there, Ben.
You know what? Ben will probably uncover some very strange mythical creatures here in Australia. He might even see the skeptical fairy. Who knows?
Get out.
Yeah,
really?
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's coming up next week. I don't know what else is coming up next week. Do I ever know what's coming up next week? We'll find out. In fact, coming up next week is an interview you did a couple of nights ago at Skeptics in the Pub.
That's right. I spoke to Liam. He talked about stats, their use, misuse, and a bit of history. And quite good. I thought he was very Michael Marshall-like in his presentation.
And for those people who missed the presentation, it will be on the Australian Skeptics YouTube channel, and I'll add a link in this week's show notes. But for this week, we are here reclining in the William Shatner studio after a big couple of days of filming. This is Richard Saunders and
Maynard. I'm going to head out and go out onto the massive grounds of the Humanities National Studios and feed a magpie or two.
Signing off until next week.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.